Hello there, welcome to News from Nepal Television. I'm Smitu Giseng Tamang. Let's begin with the top stories for this afternoon. A person dies when voltage of a power line goes out of control in Dhairing of Parbat. Fire in the meter boxes of more than 2 dozen houses, 12 locals seriously injured. Melamchi River changes its course, bringing the market area under grave risk. Millions of investment made for containing the river goes in vain. Pokhara International Airport sees 98% construction completion to officially come into operation from January next year. Ceasefire between Israel and Palestinian militants comes into effect. The truce follows 3 days of violence between the two sides. And defending champions Manchester City starts with a win in the new season of English Premier League. Erling Haaland scores 2 personal goals on his debut. Welcome back. Now the news in detail. A person was killed when the voltage of a power line went out of control this morning at Ward Number 7, Jaljala Rural Municipality in Dhairing of Parbat. Raju Acharya, chairman of Jaljala Rural Municipality, who reached the spot, informed that due to a problem in the electricity line in Dharapani village of Dhairing, meter boxes of more than 2 dozen houses in the settlement caught fire and 12 locals were seriously injured. Chairman Acharya informed that dozens of livestock have also died due to the short circuit in the electricity line, and a local animal farm has also caught fire. After last year's flood, more than 80 million rupees have been spent to bring Melamchi River back to its original course and to protect the settlements in the Melamchi market area. Locals had started to live in the old land by digging out the flooded settlements. However, the Melamchi market area is again at risk. The course of the river is changing and the dilapidated suspension bridge is at high risk of flooding. As the river changes its course, the houses in the market area has come under grave risk. To return the river to its old rhythm, embankment work was carried out across the river until the end of June. However, after the river continuously brought debris flow and deposited it in Melamchi confluence area, the embankment was buried and the river started flowing across. Millions of investments made for containing the river have been wasted. The head of Melamchi municipality, Aitaman Tamang, says that work is still underway to control the damage caused by the Tamang River. Geologists had suggested against living in the coastal area of Melamchi River following last year's flood. The Election Commission has begun the process of registration of political parties for the November 20 federal and provincial assembly elections from Sunday. This comes as the Commission sped up the preparations after government on Thursday announced to hold the elections. Sunday itself, 6 different political parties have registered at the EC in view of the upcoming federal and provincial election. According to the Commission, among the parties registering Sunday are Janamat Party, Nepal Samaveshi Party, Hamro Nepali Party, Punar Jagran Party and Maulik Jarakilo Party. Election Commission's spokesperson Shaligram Sarma Paudel said the party registration process under both the first past the post system and the proportional system for the elections will continue till August 16. The political parties that were registered on August 4 in line with the Article 271 of the Constitution are eligible to register for the polls. The parties, meanwhile, are required to submit an application to the Election Commission office specifying the details of their political party, their Central Executive Committee, number of office bearers and members of Province and District Committee, the date for submitting annual audit report and latest election of parties' central and provincial level executive committee. According to Commission, parties should submit separate applications for the members of the House of Representatives and province-based applications for member of the Province Assembly of the 7 provinces. The Pokhara Regional International Airport will officially come into operation from coming January 1, 2023. A meeting of the Board of Directors of Civil Aviation Authority of Nepal, CAN, on Sunday took a decision to this effect, said the CAN spokesperson Jagannath Nirola. The approximately 22 billion project has seen the completion of 98% construction works so far, he said, adding that a flight calibration would take place in coming October. The project that directly connects the major tourist destination, Pokhara, with the globe through international flights spans over 200 hectares of land. The No Horn campaign has been relaunched in Kathmandu Valley. Before this, the No Horn campaign was implemented on April 14, 2017 in order to control noise pollution in the valley. It is forbidden to blow the horn except in case of emergency. Albeit it was implemented for some time, it could not be implemented recently. Now the program is going to be intensified again. Mayor Shah said that this program has been restarted to continue the No Horn campaign, as blowing horns not only cause noise pollution but also have a negative effect on the mental health of people. Time for a break now. We shall be back with more updates. Do stay tuned. Welcome back. Now the remaining updates. The country has updated 553 new cases of coronavirus with zero infection-related death on Sunday. The caseloads were from the total 3,789 tests, 2,040 PCR and 1,749 antigen, according to the Ministry of Health and Population. So far, the total 972,497 infected people have got over the virus, with 433 in the same period. The recovery rate was 98.2%, while the infection rate 17%. The total number of active infection cases stands at 5,659, with 3,884 in the Kathmandu Valley. Now the international update. A ceasefire between Israel and Palestinian militants has come into effect after 3 days of violence, which left at least 43 people dead. Palestinian Islamic Jihad (PIJ) militants said the truce will begin at 23:30 local time after talks moderated by Egyptian mediators. Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid's office confirmed the ceasefire. The latest violence is the most serious flare-up between Israel and Gaza since an 11-day conflict in May 2021. The Israeli military confirmed it was striking Islamic Jihad targets in Gaza as the ceasefire came into force in response to rockets fired just before, and Israeli media reported some isolated rocket fire from Gaza in the minutes after. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres on Monday reiterated his warning against nuclear weapons 2 days after he attended an event marking the 77th anniversary of the Hiroshima bombing. This is the moment when the risk of a nuclear confrontation is back, something that we have forgotten for decades, Guterres told the Japan National Press Club in Tokyo. The UN Secretary renewed his plea with nuclear-armed countries to commit to no first use of nuclear weapons and to never to use or threaten non-nuclear armed countries with the use of nuclear weapons, with full transparency in relation to their arsenals. In his speech, Guterres praised Japan for its role in advocating for peace and disarmament. At a time when geopolitical tensions are rising and the nuclear threat is back in focus, Japan's strong and consistent voice on peace is more important than ever, said the UN Secretary-General. Guterres also said that he would be visiting Mongolia and South Korea. The UN chief on Saturday joined the prayer at the Hiroshima Peace Park to mark the anniversary. Time again for a break. We shall be back with more updates. Do stay tuned. Welcome back. You're with English News on Nepal Television, and now more from Global Updates. Hundreds of members of Brazil's LGBTQ community and their supporters marched through the seaside town of Niterói, just across the Guanabara Bay from Rio, calling on people to turn out and vote in upcoming elections to ensure a new government that will enact legislation protecting their rights. Many in the colourful crowd were critical of the government of President Jair Bolsonaro, saying his administration has done little to protect gay rights during its 4 years in power. Most consider candidate Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who was elected in 2003 and served 2 terms, as far more sympathetic to their interests, and called on their fellow LGBTQ community members to turn out in force to re-elect the former president. According to the latest polls, Lula da Silva holds a 48% lead over Bolsonaro's 27%, giving him front-runner status and a good chance of winning the October election in the first round of voting. Cuban firefighters were joined by special teams sent by Mexico and Venezuela on Sunday as they battled for a second day to control a fire blazing at a big oil tank farm in the western province of Matanzas. The blaze began Friday night when lightning struck a storage tank during a thunderstorm, and the fire spread to a second tank early Saturday, triggering a series of explosions, officials have said. A total of 122 people were treated for injuries, including 5 that officials said were in critical condition. The governor said 4,946 people had been evacuated, mostly from the Dubrok neighborhood, which is next to the Matanzas supertanker base in Matanzas city. Dense black smoke billowed up from the tank farm and spread westward more than 100 kilometers to Havana. The Ministry of Science and Technology said Sunday that the cloud contained sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide, carbon monoxide, and other toxic substances. The disaster comes as Cuba struggles with a severe economic and energy crisis, with frequent power blackouts hitting during a torrid summer. It was also unknown how much fuel had been lost to the flames. Colombian President Gustavo Petro has called for a fresh global strategy to combat illegal drugs trafficking. Speaking at his inauguration, the country's first ever left-wing leader declared the war on drugs a failure. Hundreds of thousands of people died in Colombia's decades-long civil war, fueled in part by the narcotics trade. The 62-year-old former Bogota mayor and ex-rebel fighter was elected in June on a radical manifesto promising to fight inequality and ban new oil projects. Mr. Petro told a crowd of his supporters in Bogota that it is time for a new global convention that accepts the war on drugs has failed. It has left 1 million dead Latin Americans during 40 years, he said, and it leaves 70,000 North Americans dead by overdose each year. More updates lined up at the other side, but before that, let's take a look at the highlights first. In order to further control the inflation, the U.S. Federal Reserve has raised interest rates of U.S. dollar for 4 times this year, with a total range of 225 basis points. The recovery of U.S. dollar asset income has also significantly driven the long-term U.S. dollar deposit sales in Shanghai. Since March, the U.S. Federal Reserve has raised interest rates 4 times, totaling 225 basis points. Investors in Shanghai had more investments in this area. A number of banks in Shanghai said that the interest rate of U.S. dollar deposits in joint stock banks is basically the same, but is relatively low in the 4 major state-owned banks. Market analysts said that during the year, the Federal Reserve is expected to further raise interest rates, but when inflation has eased, the rate will start to drop. Now, the sports update. Defending champions of the Premier League, Manchester City have started with a win in their first match of the new season. Norwegian forward Erling Haaland scored 2 personal goals on his debut in the league at Old Trafford.
He's got it!
Diving duo Madison Kinney and Cassiel Emmanuel Rosu made it a memorable finale in the pool for Australia, with the pair taking goals on the penultimate day of the Commonwealth Games. Kinney triumphed in the women's 3M springboard final, while Rosu proved imperious in the men's 10M platform finale. Elsewhere, there was more joy for the Aussies in the women's volleyball and netball finals and a 9-run victory over India in the T20. Indian pair Sharath Kamal and Srija Akula won the mixed doubles gold in table tennis after beating Javan Chun and Karen Lyon of Malaysia 11-4, 9-11, 11-5, 11-6. And before we wrap up, the reminder of our top stories. One person dies when voltage of a power line goes out of control in Dairang of Parbat. Fire in the meter boxes of more than 2 dozen houses. 12 locals seriously injured. Melamchi River changes its course, bringing the market area under grave risk. Millions of investment made for containing the river goes in vain. Pokhara International Airport sees 98% construction completion to officially come into operation from Jan next year. Ceasefire between Israel and Palestinian militants comes into effect. The truce follows 3 days of violence between the two sides. And defending champions Manchester City starts with a win in the new season of English Premier League. Erling Haaland scores 2 personal goals on his debut. That's it for this edition of NTV News. We shall be back with the next one at 6 this evening. Till then, goodbye. Namaste.